Good evening, everybody. You've been listening to the musical Stylings of Keith Van den Enden. You'll hear more from him throughout the evening. Thank you so much, Keith. Folks, my name is David Levy, and you are watching True Theater. In 2010, we started True Theater and have been producing quarterly events just like the one you're going to experience tonight, although generally in person. And even though we've gone online, our mission remains what it has been: to build community through the sharing of true personal stories. For those of you joining us for the very first time, welcome. You're in for a real treat. And for our friends who are returning, we are so grateful for your support. Thank you so much for coming back. We truly couldn't do this without you. Every one of our evenings of True Theater has a theme, and in honor of the end of 2020, we decided to make the theme tonight Vision 2020. Vision. Bad joke, but great stories. You are going to be impressed, in fact, with a number of different ways we approach the theme of vision tonight. And if you're joining us from within the Zoom webinar, you're in for a triple treat tonight, because not only do you have front row seat to the action, but you can ask some questions in the Q&A box, which may be a part of the Q&A session that we'll have with the storytellers at the end of the show. And as you have already seen during the pre-show music, you can participate in some of the puzzles that we're going to be posing for you tonight. 2 of them visual, 1 of them audio, and the winners of each will get a True Theater coffee mug, just like this one from True Anniversary, the beginning of season 10, but with the theme, the poster image of True Vision on it, just for winning. We're going to announce the winners of the first contest and whoever got the most of the celebrity eyes that you saw on the screen correct a little later in the show. And if you're sitting at home thinking, boy, I wish I was in that Zoom meeting instead of watching it on Facebook, or you're watching a replay and thinking, man, I wish I just joined in that Zoom meeting, you should register next time. Make sure to go to our website at truetheater.org, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter or on Instagram. You will be notified well in advance when registration opens, and you too could be in the Zoom audience. We always like to do a little something special just for the Zoom folks. And remember, we spell theater the fancy way, truetheater.org. You're actually going to see the URL on the screen popping up on the slides in between our storytellers tonight. And speaking of things that will be on the slides popping up in between our storytellers tonight, you may also notice a number that you could send a text message to to make a donation to True Theater. This is the point where I tell the people that don't like to hear talk about money, just cover your ears for a moment. I would much rather you stick around for the whole show than be turned off by a little talk about money. But if you do want to pay for a ticket, I had one friend said, please, David, let me pay for a ticket. If you do want to pay for a ticket or otherwise contribute to True Theater, is a very easy way to do it. You just text the number True10, the message True10, TRUE10, to the number 44321. The number almost couldn't be easier to remember. That's texting True10, TRUE10 to 44321. You get a link back, and from there you can follow it and text whatever you want, or donate whatever you want. Our donations tonight will be part of our continuing 10 for 10 campaign, where we encouraged people to consider donating $10 in honor of 10 years of True Theater. And in fact, a number of people have donated over the past couple of shows, the names of which you're about to see on the screen. We thank all of you very much. All those people at some point during a show texted True10 to 44321. And yes, there are some repeat names, but there are repeat people with the same name. That is not a way of making it look like we had more people donate. Again, it's 4 days ago was October 25th, 2020, exactly 10 years from October 25th, 2010, when we produced our very first evening of True Theater. And so in honor of 10 years of True Theater, we're grateful to those of you who would consider donating. Once more, that's True10 to 44321. Hey, now for what you all came here for. Friends, we always say that everyone has a story to tell. And the only difference between strangers and friends is the sharing of that story. Well, tonight, you're going to make 5 new friends. Our first storyteller and your first new friend is a training manager and, in her own words, a self-proclaimed storyteller and, most importantly, a mom. A Cincinnati native, she's raising two young and wild boys with her husband, Eric. In her free time, she enjoys reading, drinking excessive amounts of iced coffee, and volunteering at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where she advocates for families and patients in complex medical situations. Please welcome Jillian Hintz.
I am an extremely impatient person. I hate waiting. A couple years ago, actually, the very first time I went to see True Theater when it was down live at Memorial Hall, I actually drove 20 miles into the city and told my husband to do the same because I didn't feel like waiting on him to get ready. I absolutely hate it. Over the years, we've added to our family. I have two beautiful little boys now. And as many of you parents and caregivers can relate, raising children is a test in patience every single day. And my youngest son, Joey, who's now 3, challenges me all the time. Joey was born with a very complex medical story. From the moment he entered this world, it was medical procedures, hospital stays, and doctor's appointments, especially in his first few weeks of life. But through it all, he always showed us that he would be a fighter, that he would beat the odds. You could see it in his eyes. But one day, around 3 months old, Joey's eyes changed. And I actually mean that in the literal sense. I remember snuggling with my baby boy in the living room. It was just the two of us home that day. And I looked down at his face and I noticed that his eyes were moving quickly from side to side like a metronome. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Actually, even a little faster than that. Now, I'm a really practical person, so I didn't panic. I just assumed that this was probably some sort of developmental stage that I missed with the first kid. Babies are not born with perfect vision. Well, a week went by and still tick tock, tick tock. And at this point, I couldn't wait. We had a pediatrician appointment and I immediately brought this up to the doctor. And she said, yeah, I see that movement. And she said, your child has been through a lot of trauma in these first couple months. And this actually could just be a side effect of that. Sometimes eye movement is a side effect and it'll work itself out. So she said, go home and give it some time. And I thought, I hate that answer of waiting, but I listened and I took him home. By 5 months of age, Joey's eyes were still in constant motion. And at this point, my patience had worn thin. I needed an answer. I insisted that we see an ophthalmologist, and I was right. Something was off. Joey had a neurological condition that's called Nystagmus, and it's commonly referred to as dancing eyes. And it's an involuntary movement of the eyes where the brain just can't tell them to stay still. And it's not curable. Now, you may be wondering, if somebody's eyes go from side to side in constant motion, do they get sick? No, the human body is extraordinary and it knows better. Instead, the brain cuts out all of that motion. But when it cuts that motion out, it also cuts out the finer lines and details of images. So while Joey doesn't get sick, his vision is blurry, really blurry. So that was the only answer we got that day, the diagnosis. After that, the doctor said, go home, wait till he gets older and he tells you what he needs. I could not take that answer. Go home and wait. My kid is 5 months old. He's getting ready to sit up. He's getting ready to walk. And you're telling me he has blurry vision. How is that going to impact his development? And how can you tell me I can't do anything about it? But that's what I got. It turns out that over the next few months, Joey ended up developing fairly well on his own and pretty much on time because he came up with his own coping mechanisms for it. Like when he learned to walk. If the floor went from hardwood to carpet, he would get down on the ground and he would feel both sides of it to make sure that the surface was equally flat and safe to walk. By 1 year of age and 3 doctors later, because I was tired of being told to wait, I finally got some answers. Yeah, Joey had a neurological condition, Joey also had a really bad case of nearsightedness. Putting those two things together caused Joey to be categorized as legally blind. And while nystagmus is not curable, there are things that we could do as early as now to help him. I was so excited, finally. First, that day, Joey got glasses, and it did help with the nearsightedness. He was able to start navigating with a little more confidence and didn't always have to get down on the ground anymore. He still holds my hand to this day quite a lot when we're in new environments until he gets comfortable, but I'm okay with that because he's my baby, and I will always be okay with him holding my hand. In addition to that, just a few short years off, around the age 3, Joey would have access to resources at school. Things like a vision specialist that would help teach him how to use his hands to protect his body so he didn't run into things when he was by himself. And they could also provide him reading devices so he wouldn't fall behind learning his ABCs. In addition to that, around the same age, 3 or 4, Joey could have surgery. And while surgery wouldn't cure him, it would actually slow the movement of his eyes down. And when the eyes slow down, it gives the brain more time to process some of those details and finer lines. So he would be able to see a little better. I was so excited about this. I could not wait. We actually had some answers and we had a plan. I remember after that, going into Joey's room one afternoon, waking him up from a nap, and he opened his eyes ever so slightly. He was kind of in that phase you're in when you're between asleep and awake. And his eyes were completely still because that's the only time that Joey's eyes don't move. And I looked at his eyes and I thought, if those eyes would just stay still, we wouldn't have a lifetime of accommodations and adjustments and doctor's appointments and surgery. Lord knows we had plenty of other things medically to deal with. But that thought left me as quickly as his eyes snapped back into motion when he woke up, because that's not Joey. Joey has nystagmus, Joey's a fighter, and Joey will overcome any challenge you put in front of him. I honestly think the kid enjoys it. So I mentioned that Joey's 3 now. He actually had that eye surgery just last month in September. And here's the funny thing about it. I'm still waiting to find out if it worked. First, the eye movement was slowed down by surgery. And while that will improve Joey's vision, the movement is not significant enough that I will notice. So I can't look at Joey and say that I see a difference. And I can't see through his eyes. It's also a neurological condition. So now that his eyes move at a different speed, his brain has to adjust to it. That can take 8 weeks, 12 weeks, sometimes more. So his vision may not even be better yet. And finally, Joey's 3. While he is extremely smart and extremely verbal, he's still only 3. So he can't quite communicate to me the difference. And a couple days before he had that surgery, I was talking to a really good friend of mine who's got 3 adult children. And I was telling her how it was kind of annoying to have to wait to get a result. And she said, but Jillian, isn't waiting what we do as parents and caregivers? She said, I look at raising my children and, I would wait for them to make decisions. And if it was a good decision, I would support them and cheer them on. And if it was a bad decision, I would have to wait till they were ready for me to jump in and help them. Because no matter how much I wanted to jump in right then and help my kid, if I did it too early, they wouldn't be ready for me and they'd push me away and the whole process would begin all over again. And I thought about it. It is about waiting. I mean, I have young kids still, but I look at my 6-year-old now, he's making friends on the playground. What if one day he decides to make friends with a kid who I can kind of tell is probably not a good match for him? I can't tell him not to make friends with him. I have to wait and see what happens. And if he ends up getting his feelings hurt, then yeah, I step in and I support him, but not a moment sooner. My job is to wait. So the silver lining that I find in all of this is that Joey is just giving me more opportunities to practice my patience. and to practice waiting. I don't know what his milestones will be, if he'll ride a bike or drive a car. He won't know until he decides he's ready to try. What I do know is that I'm his mother, and I love him so much, and I will wait as long as it takes for him to decide. But however patient I may become on this journey with Joey, I still can't wait to see what his future holds.
Thank you so much for that story, Jillian. Friends, if you're thinking you recognize Jillian from a previous True Theater show, you may have seen her at the end of season 8 in True Blue, when she told a sort of prequel to the story that she told you tonight about the birth of her son, Joey, and the medical things that ensued that she was alluding to in the story tonight. Thank you again, Jillian. Next up, we have a wife, a sister, a mother, a friend. She's also been a minister, a counselor, a writer, a teacher, a massage therapist, a small business owner, and as you'll soon hear, more. She is 52 years old. She submitted that in her bio and admits that after all she's done, she is still trying to define who she is. Tonight, she is proud to add storyteller to the list. She resides in Cincinnati in an empty nest with a very big, goofy greyhound and her husband of 30 years, who happens to be our musician tonight. Please welcome Rose Van den Enden.
I'm adopted. The reason I mention that is because as a child, I always felt sort of strange and out of place. And I had a secret, one that I share with a character from a movie that you all will probably recognize. I see dead people. Remember that one? Now imagine telling that to your very strict Roman Catholic parents. Imagine telling them that you can feel all of these people around you and you can hear them speaking, but no one else seems to notice that they're there. Imagine shock and horror. Is this kid crazy? Is she the devil? I'm sure you can see why we never really talked about it after that. Welcome to my world, the world of a clairvoyant medium. It's a world I've inhabited my entire life. And it's a world I've worked in professionally for nearly 30 years. And although I'm currently in the process of retiring from doing professional readings for people, I'll always be a medium. The spirit people will always be around, and they can be pretty chatty when they want to be. But usually, it's the living that come to me for a reading or a message from someone who has passed away. The dead don't usually seek me out, but perhaps unusual circumstances warrant unusual interactions. September 11th has become a day of great importance and reverence in this country, and rightly so. About 10 years ago on that date, I felt the urge to go for a drive. I was in a very reflective mood, like a lot of people, and being outside on a beautiful fall day seemed like the right thing to do. So I got in my car and I drove until I ended up in a cemetery. It was a cemetery I had driven past many times, but I had never really stopped. But it was beautiful and it was peaceful and it seemed like the right place to be. So I got out of my car and started to walk amidst the headstones, just sort of wandering aimlessly around. I got about 4 rows of headstones in, away from the cemetery lane, when I stopped and I sat down on the grass. It just felt like the right thing to do. It's a hard feeling to describe, but sitting in that spot on that day in that cemetery seemed like the most natural thing in the world. So I took out the journal that I usually carry with me and I started to write in it. I'd only written a few sentences when I glanced up, and standing straight ahead of me, about 20 yards away, right next to the cemetery lane, was a young woman with long blonde hair. She was wearing something red, a jacket or a sweatshirt. And I remember thinking, now where did she come from? The cemetery was empty as far as I could see. There were no other people or cars around. I looked back at her and she just seemed to be standing there like she was waiting for someone. So I dismissed it and I looked back down to start writing in my journal again. But as I did, my eyes fell not on my journal page, but on the headstone that was next to me. I read the name on the headstone. It was a woman's name, and the dates engraved there indicated that she had died in her early 20s. And that made me feel kind of sad. And it reminded me of the young woman who was standing by the road. So I looked up again, but she was gone. There was no one there. Well, now, where did she go so fast? I thought. There were no buildings or trees or monuments for her to duck behind. That was really strange. And then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. That young woman that I had seen standing by the road, this gravestone, the one I had felt compelled to sit next to, this gravestone belonged to that young woman. I was seeing her spirit as plainly as I saw the headstone. Now, with this realization, a rush of energy and thoughts came into my mind. I knew immediately that this was right. I started seeing visions, pictures that I knew were connected to this dead young woman. So I started to write them down in my journal. I saw the insignia of a local college, one that I recognized. I saw a volleyball court with young women playing in uniform. I saw a young man. I saw a baby. I saw an ambulance with its red lights strobing. I saw some other things that I don't remember anymore, but I knew and I felt the emotions of this spirit crashing over me. I knew that she had died in an accident and that she had left behind a husband and a baby. She wanted them to know she was okay. She wanted them to know she loved them. She wanted them to continue living, and she didn't want her death to hold them back. And then, just like that, it was gone. She was gone. Now, you have to understand that this scenario is not the usual way that I connect with the spirit world. Usually, I do so very intentionally when someone asks me for a reading or a message from someone in spirit. I don't believe in going around trying to read people in the grocery store or in other public places. I believe it's an invasion of privacy, and it's an ethical line I do not cross. But this woman, somehow she had gotten me to this cemetery on this date next to this headstone, and she had appeared to me as a full body manifestation, something I had never seen before. All so she could deliver these messages to her family. Didn't I owe it to her to try to get those messages to them? Now, you also have to understand that I know some people think that I'm completely out of my mind talking about spirits and communicating with them. Believe me, in my almost 30 years of being a professional medium, I have had my share of skeptics and critics. But this young woman It was difficult, though, for me to imagine stepping over that ethical line and giving a message to her husband, someone who hadn't asked for one. This guy could think I was a complete jerk for drumming up a terribly painful event in his life. But still, I'd seen this young woman and I'd felt her longing to connect. I had to honor that. So I went home and I Googled the name on that headstone. I found an article online from a newspaper from several years prior about a woman with that name, a young woman who had coached women's volleyball at a local university, a young woman who had died in a terrible accident, leaving behind a husband and a new baby. And I also found the husband's name referenced in the article, plus his workplace. I went to the workplace's website and there he was, along with an email address. So I wrote to him. I told him all about the experience that I had had, what I had seen, what I had felt, the things that his wife had showed to me. I made it very clear to him that I did not want to bring up something hurtful and I didn't want anything from him. But I thought his wife worked awfully hard to try to get those messages through to him. And so I simply had to contact him. I hit the send button before I could change my mind, and I prayed that I had done the right thing. The next day, I got a response to my email. It was from the husband, and he thanked me for reaching out to him. He was astounded by the details that his wife had brought through, but more than that, he was relieved. He told me he'd been thinking of marrying again, but he didn't know if he should because he wanted to honor the memory of his deceased wife. Her message that she wanted him to continue living, that she wanted them to be happy, gave him the impetus to move forward in his life. That was our only interaction. But what a blessing. Love truly does transcend everything, even death.
Thank you for that story, Rose. Friends, I had the pleasure of performing on stage with Rose many years ago, and I have welcomed this opportunity for us to reconnect while preparing for tonight. I hope you enjoyed her story. And if you have any questions for her or Jillian or for any other of the storytellers you hear tonight, for those of you in the Zoom meeting, feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A box. I've already seen a couple of good ones come in. They may be asked at the end of the show. Before I introduce our next storyteller, I'd like to give you some exciting news. The winners of our first contest. You probably want to know the answers. This was a hard one, and I promise you the second one will be easier. It's funny that some people got different names correct, but ultimately the winner won with 4, only 4. So I apologize for the difficulty of the test. But the first person is Eddie Murphy. The second is Gabourey Sidibe. Third, Brad Pitt. 4, Frida Kahlo. I was really surprised nobody got that one. 5, Marilyn Monroe. 6, David Chappelle. 7, Linda Carter. 8, Princess Diana. 9, Paul McCartney. And then I'm less surprised that no one got this one. Number 10, Eartha Kitt. We had 2 people who got 4 correct. And even though we were going to give the prize to the first person, the second one kind of half identified one of the people without actually naming them. So we're giving them both credit for 4. That's Bridget Cornell and Lori Staten Smith. Congratulations, we'll be in touch with how to get your mugs. And I guess at this point, I should probably also mention, I thought maybe we shouldn't let board members play. So sorry about that, Kathy. Anyway, that's all there is for that first puzzle. Again, we have another visual coming up at intermission, which I promise you will be easier, and an audio puzzle at the end of the show before the Q&A. Our next storyteller tonight, friends, was born in Goshen, Indiana, but was raised on the slopes of Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. After a lengthy sojourn in Italy, he now lives in France with his production partner and wife, Alix Clements, temporarily. That is, he temporarily lives in France, forever married to Alix. He's a National Geographic magazine photographer, and his work includes feature stories for the magazine, covering, among other things, a lost city in the Honduras jungle. He was also interviewed on 60 Minutes for his work on the story he is about to share. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dave Yoder.
I'm a photojournalist, and I actually think that the best photographs are actually not taken. I think that they're gifts. I think that I'm a little bit suspicious, actually, of photographers who claim to have a vision. I think that the best photographs are unexpected photographs, and going into an assignment already knowing what you want is kind of an act of hubris, as if what the world is going to give you isn't good enough. For me, a photo essay is a matter of problem solving. I was going to say clairvoyance until Rose talked about, a much higher level of clairvoyance. So maybe a better way to express it would be like development of intuition or anticipation about what might be coming next, and setting yourself up in a place to capture it in a picture. But no photographer that I know talks about luck. Luck in photography is non-existent, both bad and good. And that's because editors can't publish excuses. So if there is a god of luck, it's a truly unfair god, because it rewards the unprepared. And I don't like to drop names. But I was at a party at the ambassador's residence in Rome talking to Tom Hanks. He's an actor. And he asked me, so is it true? And I didn't know what he was talking about. He goes, is it true that being a National Geographic photographer is the best job in the world? And suddenly I realized what he was talking about. I'd heard long ago that used to be a thing, a saying, that it was the best job in the world. There used to be a board game called On Assignment. And then Bridges of Madison County came along and added to that mystique in kind of a smarmy way. Didn't really do it much good. But I'm here to destroy that myth. As a great photo editor at Geographic used to say, we throw you into the middle of the lake. If you're good, you'll make it to shore. Well, in 2014, I found myself in the middle of one of those lakes, and there was no land in sight. Honestly, it started completely innocently in the hallways at National Geographic headquarters in DC. I was literally walking down the hall, innocently minding my own business, ran into the editor of the magazine, and we got talking. I was living in Rome at the time. And I just casually mentioned that, Pope Francis had become somewhat of a rock star. He was wildly popular, and he was the #1 get for every major news organization in the world. Everybody wanted to do something in depth with him, and nobody had up to that point. Well, to my horror, he says, yes, we need to do that. Write up a proposal. And I didn't see that coming. That was not my intent. It was not an elevator pitch. I was the least qualified person for that kind of assignment. I don't do big personalities. He was probably the most photographed person in the world. And National Geographic had not photographed Vatican City or the Pope in 30 years. And the last time they did, it was, the photographer was the legendary James Stanfield. And I can tell you, I am no James Stanfield. I was that dog that caught the car, and I had a really big problem to solve. So I called up my friend, the ambassador, asked him if he could arrange some kind of connection with the Vatican. And we did. The ambassador to the Vatican got involved, and we had a great lunch, and everything seemed to be going wonderfully. The Vatican representative said, we'll help you out every way we can. And I thought, wow, this is great. And my first day of shooting, suddenly I found myself in the pack of press, along with all the other photographers about 100 feet away, 100 to 1,000 feet away, depending on the occasion, getting the same pictures that everybody else was getting. And of course, that wasn't going to be good enough for National Geographic. So I spent a few weeks trying to figure out how to break this invisible barrier. The funny thing was, even the people of the Vatican didn't know how to do this, because it was kind of like divided into different fiefdoms or compartmentalized. Well, I saw this one fellow who is always at the pontiff's side, a guy named Francesco Sforza. He's a photographer, the Pope's photographer. And I thought, that's where I need to be. I need to be with him. So I made quite a few efforts to get a hold of him, and finally got some time with him. And basically said, I'd like to spend a little bit of time at your side. I'll stay out of your way, respect all the traditions of the Vatican, and I won't embarrass anybody, and it turns out that he had been 30 years earlier, he had started working at the Vatican, and one of his first assignments was to chaperone James Stanfield. So he was a fan of National Geographic, and he eventually agreed to take me under his wing. And I had this incredible access that no outside photographer has ever been given. I could walk right up to the side of Pope Francis and nobody would bat an eye. It was a remarkable experience. My favorite times were Wednesday mornings during the general audience, when St. Peter's Square would fill up with pilgrims, and they would just be euphoric, and the expressions were just amazing to photograph. And at some point, I had photographed that so much that my editor said, okay, stop shooting that. We've got enough. And I kind of went rogue, and I said, sorry, this is a once in a lifetime thing. I'm just going to keep shooting it. It was kind of addictive. And the months wore on. I was shooting maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Not only that, but other things with Pope Francis as well. And I started running out of time for a cover. Now, part of the problem that had confronted me from the beginning was that this was a cover story. And that is particularly rarefied air in terms of photography. It's like hallowed ground, the cover of National Geographic. And I'd never had a cover before. So the pressure really was ratcheted up on me. And the harder I tried, the further it seemed to elude me. It got to the point where they're actually outsourcing. They were looking for other photographs to go on the cover, which would have been a terrible humiliation and a betrayal of trust to all of the access that had been granted to me by not only the magazine, but the Vatican itself. So I put all of my hopes in Christmas Day. It was right up at the deadline. Because Pope Francis would, every Christmas stand on the balcony on the facade of St. Peter's Basilica and address the pilgrims down below. I arranged for a vision of a photograph where he would be arms outstretched, in front of a crowd. Well, that's what I had pegged all my hopes on. And at the very last minute, a cardinal got cold feet and didn't allow me to go out on the balcony. Now, Francesco Sforza, the photographer, was there with me, and he could tell that I was just crestfallen. I was defeated. I just thought it was a terrible failure. I felt like I had, blown the assignment. And so we were basically kind of like, I guess it was kind of backstage behind the facade. And there's a long line of people there to meet Pope Francis and receive his Merry Christmas and wish him Merry Christmas. And I knew from having photographed him for about 6 months that the line would deplete, and then it would just be me and Francesco Sforza standing there, and he would turn to us and he would wish us Merry Christmas, just because that's who he was. He greeted everybody, no matter who you were. And that's exactly what he did. He turned to Francesco, he wished him Merry Christmas, and he turned to me and wished me Merry Christmas. And then he turned to one of his aides and he whispered something to him, and I couldn't hear it, but Francesco could. And he turned to me, Francesco turned to me and said excitedly, he's going to the Sistine Chapel. And I knew that this was unexpected. I would have known about it. It certainly was not on any kind of schedule. And to hear Francesco excited about it was enough of an indication that it was pretty unusual, if unprecedented. So we walked with the Pontiff across Sala Regia. We walked into the Sistine Chapel, which was empty and completely silent because it was Christmas morning and nobody was, the museum was closed. Nobody was allowed in. He stood there for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, looking up at the Birth of Adam by Michelangelo. And then he turned around and walked out. I got off about 3 or 4 pictures. My hands were shaking. I think 2 of them were sharp. And Sforza turns to me and he says, "There's your cover." So to this day, I wonder whether that was Pope Francis's Christmas gift to a desperate photographer. To me, it transcended a mere gift. It was more like a miracle.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. Folks, I happen to have the book that National Geographic published of all the pictures that Dave took on that. Well, I don't know about all of them, but a lot of the pictures Dave took on that 6-month period that he was working on that shoot. And it's got essays in here. And I happen to find one of these of the pilgrims. I believe he's talking about where he's had to run in front of the Pope Mobile to get the shot. Lots of amazing pictures in there. Great job and great story, David. Thank you so much. Hey, friends, we're going to take a quick 4-minute break to give you a chance to stretch your legs, grab a bite to eat, maybe text TRUE10, that's TRUE10 to 44321 and consider making a donation to True Theater. And for those of you in the Zoom meeting, there's about to be another visual contest for you. I promise it's easier than the first one. Just to give you an idea going in, you're going to have to name the larger works that each eye you see are a part of. All right, so put your questions for our storytellers for later or your answers to that puzzle in the Q&A box during this 4 minutes while Keith serenades us with his guitar. And 4 minutes, we'll be back with 2 more stories, Q&A, and the answers to those puzzles. Thanks. Pardon me, I was just texting True 10 to 44321 and making a donation to True Theater. No, I wasn't. I was just working that in one more time. Hey, thanks again, Keith Van den Enden, for the music that took us through the intermission. Folks, if you want to hear more of Keith's music, you should subscribe to his YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/KeithVE. V as in Vanden, E as in Enden, Keith VE at youtube.com. By the way, we'll have the results of the intermission contest to identify all those cool eyes you saw on the screen in just a little bit. Meanwhile, if you're thinking, hey, Dave, can I tell a story at True Theater someday? Well, the answer is definitely maybe. You can certainly pitch a story, and to do that, you got to go over to truetheater.org and visit our Submit a Story page. We've got 3 more themes scheduled for the rest of this season, and if you have a story that you think might fit one of them, you should indeed submit a story. We also have an option to submit a story if you think you've got a story we just need to hear. We have picked themes in future seasons, knowing we had a story that was ripe for that theme. Our themes coming up are, on January 28th, we are producing True Birth, so a birth theme. On April 29th, we're producing True Dog. And on July 29th, with the theme that was voted on by our audience in the Zoom audience from the last show, we're doing True Neighbor. So if you didn't write that down fast enough, all that information is on our website at truetheater.org. And also, by the way, we have a one-off show with a date to be determined yet, but we're producing it thanks to a generous grant from the ArtsWave Pride Committee. And it's being called True Voices Behind the Rainbow Curtain. And it will have stories with an LGBTQIA+ theme. So like I said, the date and format of that show are to be determined. But if you have a story that you think fits any of those themes that I mentioned, go over to truetheater.org and submit it. While you're there, get on the mailing list so you don't miss the announcements when we are actively looking for all of them. We consider ourselves in the story gathering phase for all these shows right now. So you will receive a response for anything that you submit. Also, if you're on our mailing list, you will start getting our new newsletters, which are currently in development, and I'm looking forward to. Some of you may have seen an early example of one of those already. Lovely newsletters with profiles of storytellers and board members, and even articles about storytelling in general. Another reason to get on that mailing list. Okay, back to the show. Folks, our next storyteller is a founding member and president of the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky chapter of the Foundation Fighting Blindness. And he's also on the board of trustees of the Cincinnati Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. An Ohio boy married to a California girl, he and his wife, Paula Tody, the main anchor for Local 12 here in Cincinnati, live in the East End on the banks of the Ohio River with their 2 Shelties, Harley and Rosebud. By vocation, he runs his own design and branding firm that he has started in 2001, garnering clients like IBM, BMW, and Disney. Articles, lectures, awards, and fellows, all the things that come from a talent like his have come, and all of that stemming from the intrigue he felt watching his mother draw when he was a child. And if it sounds like his life was largely influenced by the inspiration of his mother, you're about to hear just how much he was inspired by his father. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Smith.
My father was a hero. He was a World War II vet who stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day and returned home with a Purple Heart. He did all this while in the early stages of blindness. See, my dad had retinitis pigmentosa, and RP is a degenerative inherited retinal disease that slowly steals your peripheral vision and causes night blindness. It also causes most people by the age of 40 who have RP to be blind. I had a 50% chance of eventually seeing signs of blindness from RP. And as a child, I wasn't prepared to confront my father's blindness, but my mom made sure I did. One day I made an insensitive remark about how my dad stumbled over things, and when he would drop things, he'd have difficulty finding them. And I started to equate those things with ignorance, and I'd never thought of my dad that way. So mom took a piece of paper and she rolled it up and handed it to me and told me to look through it. I looked through this piece of paper, this cylinder, and I could see our kitchen cabinets awash from the sort of cool fluorescent lights. And then it was just surrounded by white nothingness. But I still didn't really understand. So a couple years later, when I was about 10, I was spending the night with my friend Rick, and he and I and some friends were out running around through the neighborhood, doing all the things that boys that age do. And I remember Rick was running out in front of me, and he jumped over some shrubbery, and I didn't see the shrubbery and ran directly into it. And I remember that being the first time that I understood something about what my dad was struggling with his night blindness. And then about 4 years later, I was on the third hole of my first round of golf. Probably should have been my last round. And I hit my drive. I went to walk away from the tee, and I realized eventually that I had left my tee in the ground in the tee box. So I turned to walk back over to pick up my tee, and I didn't see that Rick was there on the tee box mid-swing, and his 3-wood connected with my forehead. And I woke up several seconds later, face down in a pool of blood. And well, we eventually were able to laugh about it later, much later. I realized that I had landed next to Rick's older brother, Randy, was there, and I had landed next to his golf ball, and his golf ball was covered in blood. And imagine this, I woke up to Randy yelling, "Oh my God, it's his eye." So that was the first time I got a real glimpse of what my dad was dealing with poor peripheral vision. So as I grew older and I watched my father's vision continue to fail, Dad owned a service station, and I remember watching him work on customers' cars with great difficulty, as you can imagine, but even greater determination. The thing about gradual vision loss, which is horrible if you can imagine, is that it at least gives you a chance to adapt over time. Well, my dad never did. His world was small, and he just was able to function in his world until he couldn't. Dad missed so much of life because he never learned to adapt. So I inherited a lot from my dad, besides my hairline. I inherited, I learned his sense of determination and his work ethic, and probably the most valuable thing was how I learned to adapt by watching his unwillingness to. I also inherited RP. So I'm a graphic designer and a fine artist who's going blind. But unlike my dad, I'm determined to adapt. So you remember that rolled up piece of paper? That demonstration, I'm a very visual learner, and that demonstration from my mom was incredibly enlightening. But I've realized over the years it wasn't very accurate. So with RP, and while it's different for many people, my central vision is intact. But as my peripheral vision fades, the brain compensates for that vision loss and basically creates this false sense of reality. You think you can see when you actually can't. It's not just white nothingness like I thought it was. So there was a time when I wouldn't have crossed a crosswalk at 2nd and Elm downtown in front of a driver who had no intention of stopping at the intersection, but I did. There was a time when I would have seen my wife in my periphery as we were riding our bikes down Riverside Drive. But one time I didn't, and I haven't ridden my bike since. There was a time when I would have ducked under a massive tree branch as I was rushing through Millennium Park in Chicago near the Art Institute. But one time I didn't. So having seen my dad's struggles with vision loss, I started to adapt to my vision loss early. The problem with RP is that as soon as you start to adapt, it progresses. And you never stop adapting. So blindness is considered the most feared health condition ahead of heart disease, stroke, and cancer. Pierre Verlet once said that the sighted judged the blind not for what they are, but because of the fear that blindness inspires. I've had cancer, and cancer just taught me that blindness was another condition that I could live with. Another thing that blindness has brought me, it's brought a lot of great people into my life that I otherwise wouldn't have known. Those people have taught me compassion and empathy. And that compassion and empathy actually started with that rolled up piece of paper. Adaptation's also been important in my work. A few years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference in San Francisco, a design conference on designing with empathy. And I was presenting with Chris Downey, who's an architect who lost his sight suddenly after brain surgery to remove a tumor. And Chris was told after he came out of surgery, you're going to have to learn a new vocation. You're going to have to find out what you're going to do with your life now that you can't be an architect. 6 months later, Chris was back at work as an architect. He's since built a thriving practice working with other architects and businesses and institutions who are designing buildings to accommodate people with vision loss and blindness and other disabilities. Similarly, but in contrast to Chris's situation, as I was slowly losing my vision, I had been adapting my approach to design based on what I learned as I lost my vision, so that I could design spaces that were more effectively designed for people with vision loss, but also being able to enhance experiences for people who are sighted. So I still have a design practice, but I'm transitioning more and more into fine art. And with about 5 degrees of peripheral vision left, where most people have about 180, I've had to work differently and approach my work differently. And since I can't take in all the contextual elements of a subject the way I used to, and I can't even always see an entire canvas, I've learned to use tools and techniques, different ways of working to enhance the way that I work today. So as an example of that, I'm currently working on a large canvas, a large painting of the Truckee River in California near Lake Tahoe. And I can't see the entire canvas as I'm working. So I think of that canvas as a series of smaller canvases. And then I step back away from the canvas to take it in as a whole as the work progresses. Another way that I've adapted to accommodate how I paint is by studying great works of art by other artists. sometimes even copying them so that I can learn different ways to approach my paintings. A few years ago, my wife and I, during a visit to Paris, we went to the Louvre, and it was one of those things that we realized that I have limited time to check off some of those things that are highest on my bucket list. And I was like a kid in a candy store. But I wasn't prepared for how I was going to respond when I saw the Mona Lisa. And there are works that I admire more than the Mona Lisa, but she is such an iconic representation of great works of art. And I had always feared that I wouldn't get a chance to see her. So we're standing there in front of the Mona Lisa, my wife at my side, hundreds of people around. And to my surprise, I started crying. I started weeping. And there weren't tears of sorrow. There were tears of joy at the fact that I was getting to see this, and I never thought I would. And that blindness didn't get to take that away from me yet. I only wish my father could have been there and that he could have seen her too.
Thank you so much for that, Tim. Folks, I hope you got a chance to look at that picture, the painting that was on the slide coming out of Tim's story. That's a piece of his artwork. He calls it Lake Tahoe Autumn. And if you were to find him and follow him on Facebook, you can see many, many more examples of his great artwork, both paintings and photography. Now, real quick, before we give you our final storyteller of the evening, the answers to contest number 2, the eyes that you saw. And I was right, this was a little easier for some of you. Our winner got 7 correct. If you'll bring that slide back up. All right, just to give you the answers. Number 1 was from the movie poster for A Clockwork Orange. Number 2 was a disturbing scene from a Dali Buñuel surreal film called Un Quien Andalou. If you'd seen it, you'd know. Number 3 is the Sphinx in Egypt. Number 4, our cartoon cutie, Betty Boop. Number 5, the dollar bill. Number 6, the Mona Lisa. Number 7 is taken from an image from our poster for this show. We would have also accepted the artwork of Sarah Miller, who goes by the handle Moon Forest Studio on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Sarah, by the way, for lending us your artwork for our poster. That handle of hers is Moon Forest Studio. And the final one is from a famous, I think it's famous, bust of Alexander the Great. So with 7 correct, we have 2 winners. We're going to give them both a mug. It's Jim Waldvogel and Jenny Frisch. Thank you both for playing. All right. Our final storyteller for tonight, and as we say, last but not least. She was born and raised here in Cincinnati, Ohio, raised by her mother with her 2 younger brothers and sisters. I don't want to tell you what she does because that's part of her story, but I can say she's certified as a senior professional in human resources and has received several awards and recognitions for her professional and community achievements. She's an active member of a Toastmasters International Club. Hey, me too. And she enjoys traveling, reading, crafting, and learning about bourbon. I can certainly get behind that. She is a proud mother of a magnificent daughter and a wonderful son-in-law, and the doting grandmother of their 17-month-old twins. Friends, please welcome Arlene Koth.
So one day, my mother sends me and my brother to the grocery store. She tells us we need to go and pick up a few things. I was 10, my brother was 7. This wasn't unusual. We were told sometimes to walk to the store because it was around the corner. And this was a time when you could send your kids around the corner to do errands. So this was our local grocery store. We went there all the time. I hated being asked to go to the store. Now, most people would say, why did you hate it? When you're 10 and you get to do something so grown up, isn't that fun and exciting? Well, it wasn't fun and exciting for me because I was embarrassed to go to the grocery store. I was embarrassed because we were poor. Now, we didn't live in abject poverty or anything like that, but we were poor enough that we needed government assistance. And part of that government assistance that we got was food stamps. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with food stamps, they come in this little like coupon book. And that coupon book has what I would consider textured Monopoly money. Same size as a dollar bill, but all of these little silly colors for all the different denominations. And so when you went to the store and paid for your food, you had to rip everything out of this coupon book and give it to the person. So basically everybody in the vicinity knew that you were using food stamps. And so it was embarrassing because it wasn't fun to be poor, right? So I did not like going to the grocery store, but when my mother says go, that's what we do, we go. So my brother and I get to the grocery store, we get this list, it's not long, but we put everything up on the conveyor belt. And the embarrassment that I had about going to the grocery store escalated into dread. It escalated into dread because I saw the person who was going to be ringing us up. The person standing behind the register was a rather large white woman. This woman had a permanent grimace on her face, and she had this frizzy, over-processed blonde poof of hair, and she was mean and she was nasty. But not only was she mean and nasty, she was also racist. Now you might wonder how a 10-year-old knows that a person is racist. Well, this was back in the early 80s, and so some things that we would definitely not tolerate then, or tolerate now, were happening then. And I remember every time we would go to this store, I would watch as she would be very, very nice to all of the white customers. She'd talk to them, she'd be collegial, she'd have conversations. She was as sweet as pie. As soon as a Black person got up to her, she was curt, she was disrespectful, she was nasty. She would not put the change of Black people's change in their hands. She would put it on the counter or on the conveyor belt. She would say, "you people," which is code for the N-word, which she also would use when she thought she could get away with it. I observed all of these things when we would go to the store on a regular basis. So when I saw this woman, and we'll call her Pat Jones because that was her name. When I saw Pat Jones, I thought, wow, this is going to be a great day. So anyway, I take the food stamps, I rip them out to give to her, I hand them to her. And the look of contempt and the disgust that rolled off of her tongue when she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." I knew right then that my vision for my life was going to be very different than I had thought it would be that morning. Not that I had actually thought about it, but in that moment, I knew my vision for my life. What I knew was that I never, ever wanted to feel the way that Pat Jones had made me feel in that moment. I never wanted to feel small and ashamed and embarrassed and dreading being able to be anywhere. And I didn't want that same feeling for anyone else. So it's funny because usually inspiration comes from positive things and positive people. But every now and then, inspiration comes from a very unexpected place. And on that day, Pat Jones inspired me to start working towards my vision. So fast forward about 6 or 7 years, so I'm about 16, 17 years old, and I've gotten a job at the local drugstore. Now this was before the grocery stores had their own pharmacies. So oftentimes they shared a footprint with a grocery store. And so I worked in the local drugstore that was right next door to our grocery store that we had grown up going to as kids, the one that Pat Jones worked at. Now, what's funny about this is that I had the pleasure of working with Pat Jones's daughter at that drugstore. And when I say pleasure, I mean absolutely not a pleasure. She was just like her mother. She was as nasty and as mean and as racist as her mother. So if you ever heard the adage, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, in their case, I'm not sure that the apple ever came off the tree. That's how similar they were. Her daughter was nasty to every other Black person that worked in the store and even to some of the customers, just like her mother was. I had gotten fed up, and one day she had just gone too far and she said something. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember this day because I basically told her where she could go with her attitude and all of the nasty, racist things that she said. And like most bullies, she went and got reinforcements. So she walked over to the grocery store where her mother still worked and brought her mother over to our place of employment. So I stood there, and it was very reminiscent of that moment I had when I was 10. The difference now is I was a lot older and had more confidence. And I was working towards that vision of never feeling that way again, or allowing someone to make me feel that way or make other people feel that way. And so in no uncertain terms, with all the new language that I had learned from the age of 10 to now, I let Pat Jones and her daughter know that I was no longer going to put up with their bullshit. So that was another turning point for me in my quest for my vision. Fast forward about 10 years or so, and my then husband and I had bought a home a couple of years previous, so we were about 26 years old. And this day we were out walking our dog and our daughter. I'm not sure which one of them was walking better, but we were out taking a walk. And we're walking down our street, and about 6 or 7 houses down, I see a person pull into a driveway. They get out, they walk up to their door, unlock the door, and go in. You're never going to guess who it was. It was Pat Jones. Pat Jones lived on the exact same street that I lived on, in an exactly similar house that I owned as well. And there was a part of me that really wanted to go and say something to her. But I realized that my vision was about treating people with dignity, treating people with respect. Now, don't get me wrong. I did do a little happy dance inside. There was a moment of glee. But what I realized was that here I stood 16 years later, living on the same street as the woman who wanted to maintain her place of assumed superiority over poor Black people. But because of my vision, I was already starting to make changes, not just in my life, but in the lives of other people. So let's fast forward one more time to today. And I won't say how many years are in between that. That's between me and my birth certificate. But what I will tell you is that I have now the best job ever. Because what I get to do is the vision that I've had for a very long time. I now run a consulting firm. And that consulting firm specializes in workplace equity. So I get to go and work with all kinds of employers nationwide, helping them to treat their employees and therefore their customers and their clients with respect, with dignity, regardless of their race, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. I get to help people change their culture so that people are being treated not the way that Pat Jones treated me and my brother, but the way that we all hope that we treat each other with that same dignity and respect. So what I'll say right now is this. All those years ago, I did not go and confront Pat Jones. But Pat, if you're out there today, I want to say, because inspiration comes in sometimes the most unexpected ways, thank you for inspiring me to be who I am today.
Thank you so much for that story, Arlene. Folks, if you're interested, the name of her business is called OPC Consulting, easy to find online. Thanks again, Arlene. Folks, that's our show. We do have a Q&A with our storytellers coming right up with questions asked by members of our Zoom audience. And by the way, you can still submit questions through the Q&A link along with your answers to the final contest, which is coming right up, an audio puzzle, which I'll describe in a moment. But first, I want to thank all our storytellers tonight. Again, that was Jillian and Dave and Rose and Tim and Arlene. Our musician for tonight was Keith Van Den Enden. Thank you so much, Keith. Our magicians behind the scenes, making everything work, are Jackson Short, Annette Ucci, and Patrick Romelli. And we also have to thank all these people whose names you see on the screen right now. At one point or another, we got an assist throughout this process from every one of them. And look, if you look towards the end of that list, there's you if you're reading this, because folks, we always say it takes two to tell a story. That's the person telling it and the person receiving it. If you're here with us tonight, you've opened up your ears and your hearts, and you've given us the honor of receiving our storytellers' stories. And we thank you so, so much for doing that. We're going to take just a quick 2-minute break here for our last audio contest to play. Let some of you stretch your legs before the Q&A, and in case some of you want to drop off, that's, you could do that too. Maybe you want to text TRUE10, that's TRUE10 to 44321, and make a donation to True Theater. By the way, if you can't remember that, our website, if you go to the bottom of the page, has a donation button at the bottom. And I just want to quickly describe this contest for you before it gets started here. When we play it, you're going to hear 5 songs sort of merged together, and you're going to hear it on repeat 4 times. You just got to name the 5 songs. Put that answer in the chat box. And folks, don't forget that our next show is True Birth, which will be on January 29th. So whether we see you there or right after this short break before the Q&A, until next we see you, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay true. Here's the audio clip for contest number 3.
You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Hearts on fire. You must be alive. Everybody's waiting for you to break down. Everybody's watching to see the fallout.
That will loop 3 more times, but I should tell you, every song title has the word eyes in it. Here it comes 3 more times.
You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Hearts on fire. You must be alive. Everybody's waiting for you to break down. Everybody's watching to see the fallout. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Hearts on fire. You must be alive. Everybody's waiting for you to break down. Everybody's watching to see the fallout. control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. Hearts on fire, you must be alive. Everybody's waiting for you to break down. Everybody's watching to see the fallout.
Hey there, everybody. We've got a number of people who've stuck around. Good to see all our smiling faces of our storytellers with us tonight. Thank you once again, everybody. I look forward to chatting with you more after the show when we toast proper. Meanwhile, I've got some questions for each of you. Our audience is interested in knowing. I'm going to do them in the order in which you spoke tonight. So, Jim asks, does Joey's condition affect his relationship with his brother?
No, they fight like two brothers would fight, and we end up having to put them in separate corners of the home fairly often. Honestly, Will, my oldest, is 2 years older than Joey, and we made the commitment since he was so young that we would just normalize everything that came with our youngest son. And so in Will's perspective, that's just Joey, and he is who he is.
Does Will ever take advantage of Joey's inability to see so well?
He hasn't told me he has, but I wouldn't be surprised. He's pretty sneaky.
Okay, they are boys after all.
He's a sneaky big brother.
Super. Thanks a lot, Jillian. Say, Rose, Jack asked, what do you like most about being a medium? Is it the ability to do it or the effect that it has on other people?
Oh, it's definitely the effect it has on other people. It's I don't even know how to explain that. I mentioned the movie The Sixth Sense, and at the very end of that movie, the little boy is sitting in the car with his mother, and he tells her a story about how her grandmother or her mother was there after she had passed away, and it's this very moving moment. And that's really what mediumship is about for me, is the idea that we can help people understand that life does continue on, and that that our people are still with us and they're still watching us, and the love continues. It's just, they're just not in the physical body anymore. So yeah, it's definitely that part of things that keeps you going.
Is it too long of an answer to ask you what is behind your motivation to retire?
Behind my motivation to retire is that I've been doing this since I was about 21 years old, and I'm tired. I don't mean to make it sound any more complex than that. I'm kind of worn out. It does, I will say, it takes a lot of energy when you do mediumship work on a regular basis. It is a lot like doing something that's physically active, just because from an energy standpoint, you have to adjust your own energy. And so from that perspective, it can be draining sometimes. And so I think at this point in my life, I'd like to do something that might be a little less draining. And, but like I said, I'll always be a medium. That will never go away.
Oh, thanks, Rose.
Sure.
Hey, David, we have two people ask similar questions of you. I have a feeling these are probably your most common questions you're asked. Jacqueline wonders, what was it like to meet Pope Francis? And Jim asks, is he as nice as he seems to be?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I was around him a lot. And it's not like we'd like have coffee every morning or anything like that, you know, but he just seemed, you know, I was around him a lot when no other journalists or no other cameras were around. So, you know, and even when he didn't know I was around. So, you know, I never picked up on any sense that he was some, you know, kind of fake or charlatan in any way whatsoever. And he just seemed to me exactly what he seems to be like. one thing it may sound kind of weird, but he's got very soft hands. When you shake his hand is very soft. That struck me. But he just seemed, I mean, you know, when the Swiss guards will like pull the door open for him, he'll stop and greet the Swiss guard. And when he'd be around other cardinals, he'd be checking his watch, you know, quite a bit and stuff. But when he was like in the general audiences with the pilgrims, you'd never see him, he'd never shirk his time there. You'd never see him checking his watch. He'd stick it all the way through to the end, no matter how hot and how tired he was and stuff. So my visual observations were that that he seems to be what he seems to be.
That's great. I find myself checking my watch when I talk to cardinals too, so I'm not surprised. Another question for you. What was your first impression of the Sistine Chapel?
My first impression of the Sistine Chapel. Well, I went there. I don't even remember the first. I've been in there so many times now. I don't even remember the first time. I can only remember the last time, which is like, here I am again in the Sistine Chapel. And bizarrely, the last time I was there with Ed Burns, the actor, and so it was just like, yep, this is Sistine Chapel. There's Michelangelo and blah, blah, blah. I don't remember it. Honestly, I don't remember the first time I was there.
That's all right. The last one was a good story. I appreciate that. All right. Hey, Tim, what is a portrait or a work of art that you haven't seen in person yet that you still want to visit?
I think any portrait of Ed Burns, probably. Wow, that's a tough one. I would say that I am most moved by any work by John Singer Sargent. And there are still lots of his works, especially his most prominent works, that I haven't seen yet. So that would be it. I'd say if I could ever get to a show, an exhibit someplace where a great collection of his works were there, without a doubt, that would be, you may never get me out of there.
Cool. I'm going to have to look him up. John Singer Sargent?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know his work yet, but that's cool. Thanks for the recommendation. Also, who, perhaps besides John Singer Sargent, is there an artist that inspires you the most?
Well, yeah, he'd be my fallback. There are a number of them. Honestly, I mean, I'm a member of the Cincinnati Art Club, and those people inspire me a great deal. Their passion, some are very accomplished and some not so much. But their love of art is intense. And now that we can't get together because of COVID as much as we used to, at sketch groups and things like that. But when we do, I'm incredibly inspired by those people. It's just to watch them and to interact with them and to learn from them and have them learn from me is really moving. But I'd say as far as accomplished artists, I think that I always fall back on Sargent because anytime I look at his work, I am so moved to want to paint that it's like as a kid when I'd watch a baseball game, I had to leave the game to go out and play baseball. And it's the same with Sargent's work. I'm so moved that I just have to go paint.
That's great. High recommendation then. Excellent, thanks. Arlene, what is a success story involving your company now that you're getting to do your dream job?
Oh, wow. I find it a success every time I get a chance to go into a company that is doing intentional work around increasing the equity inside of their organization, because it is not easy work and it doesn't happen overnight. So I do have one client that I absolutely love working with, and they are making such huge progress in reshaping an entire agency that helps folks with developmental disability. So I don't have a client that I don't love working with because they're all putting in the work. So I consider all of those to be success stories.
What's the longest you might work with a client?
It's some of them are multi-year. So there's probably when we do major culture shift work, it's a minimum of 12 months. And so oftentimes that's just getting things situated and understanding what things need to get done. And then we work for more years to get more work done. So we take it a little bit at a time because it's very difficult to make the changes and run a business. So we try to be very cognizant of the fact that everybody still has day-to-day work to do, and we're still trying to make these big changes. So we take it in small segments. So a lot of times it's multiple years.
Do you find that business is picking up? I hope the answer is yes.
Business picked up in a way I was not expecting this year for unfortunate reasons. But the good thing is I feel like there's a great opportunity to make a positive impact, even though we're dealing with some really negative things. So yes, business has picked up quite a bit. I get a lot of calls for people wanting me to come in and do one-off trainings about diversity and inclusion, and that's not the kind of work that I do. I definitely do longer-term work that's all about sustainable changes.
Super. That's great. Thanks. One more question for Jillian. Somebody wants to know, how is Joey doing? Does he have any more surgeries coming up?
He's doing fantastic. So no surgeries on the horizon right now. They're never off the table with his medical history. I know, David, you mentioned like his heart defects. Right now, we've had 2 open heart surgeries that are in the past. We just hit our 2-year anniversary on one of them. Actually, 3-year anniversary now. So he's really cute. And do you guys want to see a picture of him really fast?
Yeah, sure. Bring it up.
I actually have a very recent one. Give me a hot minute to open my phone. But this is him.
Oh, that's great. Those red frame glasses?
He's wearing his red one. He switched to red from blue. So we're doing that. But no, he's doing health-wise, we're what we call coasting mode. We're just taking it one day at a time, but he's doing great.
Okay. Well, good luck to all of you. And thank you all again for your stories. Folks, I just want to thank you all for sticking around, participating tonight, opening up your hearts and ears to our storytellers, for the donations that are coming in or that may still come in by texting TRUE10 to 44321 or just going to our website at truetheater.org. Here's the answers to the audio puzzle. We had so many people get 4 right. We had to pick a random winner, I'm afraid. But the answers were Van Morrison's Brown-Eyed Girl, followed by, from the soundtrack to Hamilton, History Has Its Eyes on You, followed by the Platters' Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and Eyes Open by Taylor Swift, and finishing with the Eagles' Lion Eyes. Our judges drew one of the persons with 4 correct as our winner, and that is Jacqueline Johnson Wilkinson. Congratulations, Jacqueline. We'll be in touch with you about how to get your mug. I'm sure we all have something else to do now. I have to take out the garbage. So hopefully you'll be back with us for our show in January for True Birth. Get all the details about everything coming up at our website. Sign up for our mailing list. And until next we see you, be true.